In our number 10 spot today, we have Chinnamasta. Chinnamasta is a Hindu and Buddhist goddess of self-sacrifice and sexual restraint. Her name literally means she whose head is severed, so these next couple stories probably won't be all that surprising. There is one legend that claims that she, along with other gods and goddesses, were searching the ocean for an immortality elixir. Apparently she drank the demon's portion of the potion and then decapitated herself in order to prevent them from ever reclaiming it. The other legend says that her and her attendants were bathing for too long one day, which led to them being extremely hungry. Instead of doing literally anything else, like the goddess of self-sacrifice that she is, she decapitated herself so that they could drink her blood. Definitely weird, but I appreciate the sentiment. Chinnamasta is depicted holding her own severed head in her hand with 3 spurts of blood coming out of her neck. 2 of these streams are going into the mouths of her attendants, and the final one going into her own mouth. In our number 9 spot today, we have Amit. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. Amit is an ancient Egyptian goddess with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion or leopard, and the bottom of a hippopotamus. The name Amit means eater of the damned or devourer of the dead, and that is honestly basically exactly what she is. She is greatly feared, and for a good reason. She lives near the scales of justice in Duat, which is the Egyptian underworld. This is where she does her work. After a person dies, their heart is weighed on the scales against the feather of truth. If the heart was light enough, the person would be allowed to pass into the afterlife, but Amit is always waiting for those whose hearts are heavy. If a person's heart was too heavy and unbalanced the scale, then Amit would eat the heart and they would be denied entry to the afterlife. It is said that the souls of those who were denied were destined to be restless forever. In our number 8 spot today, we have Apollo. Apollo is a Greek god who is the son of Zeus, and at a first glance seems like a pretty likable guy, but he's done some extremely questionable things. You know what they say, like father, like son, and in the case of Apollo, that is pretty accurate considering he has quite a temper. Apollo has been known to punish people with illness and plague, which is truly pretty messed up. During the Trojan War, Apollo shot arrows that had been infected with the plague into a Greek camp, which is honestly a pretty twisted thing to do. There is another story about him where he was rejected by Cassandra, who was the daughter of King Priam and Queen Hecuba of Troy, and so he decided to punish her. He gave her the ability to see the future, but only the tragedies that the future holds. And the worst part, if she told anyone, no one would ever believe her. In our number 7 spot today, we have Xingtan. Xingtan is a Chinese deity who has some bad intentions. He fights against the supreme divinity. Xingtan was fighting a battle for supremacy when he was beheaded. You think that this would be the end, but it absolutely was not. Nothing was about to stop him, not even losing his head. His head was buried in a mountain, but he picked up his shield and his axe and just carried on. He regenerated a face with his nipples becoming his eyes and his belly button becoming his mouth, and he continued to fight, which was represented by a martial dance. While there is something really creepy about this story, I guess the moral is to never give up on your plight for evil? In our number 6 spot today, we have Izanami and Izanagi. This is kind of like a 2-for-1 deal because both of these people play a huge role in this story. Izanami no Mikoto comes to us from Japanese mythology, and her name means she who invites. She is both the goddess of creation and death and is the former wife of the god Izanagi no Mikoto. So, it's a bit of a long story, but basically at one point she dies. This of course upsets her husband, and so he goes to the land of the dead to find her. Once he does, he can't quite see her because I guess the visibility isn't great in the underworld. He then goes to take her home with him, but she says she can't leave because she has already eaten the food of the underworld, which has made her one with the dead. Later, when she's sleeping, he takes a torch up to her face and sees that she is no longer beautiful, but has rotting flesh with maggots like a zombie. That zombie part isn't in the story, but it's just how I imagine it. After this, he runs the heck away because she woke up and is trying to chase him down. He ends up making it all the way to the entrance to the world of the dead, and he pushes a huge boulder in front of it that now separates the world of the dead from the world of the living, but it also sadly separates him from his wife. Of course, she is mad at everything that just happened, even though she was acting pretty weird and is also dead. So she swears that she will kill 1,000 living people every day because he left her there. And to this, he replies that he will offer 1,500. In our number 5 spot today, we have Huitzilopochtli. Huitzilopochtli is a god in the Aztec religion, and he is the god of the sun, but also of war and human sacrifice. His origin story is a pretty wild one. So, his mother is Coatlicue, who is very important. She already had other fully grown children when she was impregnated with him. Her grown children were the female deity Coalxauhqui and her 400 brothers. All these children were really mad at how their mother became pregnant again, and they began conspiring to kill her, which is just nuts. This is when Huitzilopochtli burst from his mother's womb in full armor, and he was also fully grown. He knew about the conspiring, and he fought his brothers and sisters literally right after being born. He then beheaded his sister and threw her body off the mountaintop, which is kind of messed up. After this, he chased his brothers around and they became scattered all throughout the sky. This is why he is seen as the sun, his sister the moon, and his brothers are the stars. In our number 4 spot today, we have Loki. Loki is a Nordic god and is quite the little trickster, as he basically devised his way into becoming a deity. Basically, there is a place called Asgard, and when that was being built by Odin, who is the king of the gods, Loki came and offered to help out with the build. To make a long story short, basically there was a giant helping with the build, and Loki made a special deal with him. If the giant finished the build by a certain time, he would be owed the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya. Odin obviously didn't want to give these things over, but Loki assured him that the giant wouldn't be able to complete the build by that day. What Loki didn't know is that the giant had a stallion who was helping him, and he was on track to finish the build and win this deal. That's when Loki decides to transform himself into a mare. In mare form, he went over and wooed this stallion and led him off into the woods. In the woods, one thing led to another, and Loki in mare form ended up pregnant. After this, he gave birth to an 8-legged spider horse for some reason I do not know, and then he gave this weird baby horse to Odin as a gift. And apparently, this is how he became a god, but also this led to the giant being killed by Thor. So this story is both weird and pretty messed up. In our number 3 spot today, we have Hel. Based on her name, this might not be surprising, but Hel is the Viking goddess of the underworld. She is the daughter of Loki and a giantess. She was the person in charge of those who died either from illness or from old age, as there were other gods who would be in charge if they passed away under other circumstances. Hel is depicted as very greedy, and she is a demigod with half her body dead and the other half alive. It is said that when she was born, disease also came into the world, which honestly would be such a terrible legacy to hold. She is known for going through towns and killing everyone, or sparing just a few, and that all depends on whether she goes through the town with a broom or a rake. In our number 2 spot today, we have Kali. Kali is a Hindu goddess, and man, she is cool. While she is often paired with Shiva, who is quite calm, she, on the other hand, is known for her outbursts and violence. She is often depicted standing on or trampling Shiva while she's wearing a skirt made out of human arms and heads. She was the one who took down the demon named Rakta Bija. I know I said that wrong, but I couldn't find a pronunciation on the internet, so I just sounded it out. This demon was incredibly hard for humans to defeat because if he was wounded, he would be able to regenerate from one single drop of his own blood, so Kali was called in to help, and man, she did exactly what she needed to do. Kali drank the demon's blood and then ruined his body and all of the clones, which in the end took him out for good. To celebrate her big win, she danced around trampling over the dead bodies, and you guessed it, Shiva too. In our number 1 spot today, we have Cronus. Cronus is the son of the god Oronus and the goddess Gaia, and to describe Cronus as a problem child would be explaining it lightly, but a lot of that has to do with his father. Oronus had locked some of Gaia's children in Tartarus, which is sort of like an underworld, so Gaia asked the rest of her children to punish him for the evil deed. Cronus jumped up at the opportunity and actually ended up castrating his own father. After this, the rest of Gaia's children were freed, but Cronus decided to re-imprison them again, and then he proceeded to take his father's throne and marry his own sister. Because of this, his mother was absolutely rattled, and she predicted that he would end up being overthrown by one of his own children. This led Cronus to eat all of his own children as they were born, so that he could stop that from happening, which I guess is one way to do it. Luckily, his wife and mother hid one of these babies away, who ended up being Zeus. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Pharaoh. Pharaoh comes from Maori mythology, and he is the lord of darkness and the embodiment of all evil. He of course needs a home to match his dark persona, so he resides in the underworld. He is responsible for all illness of people, and some tribes believe that when people die, they descend into the underworld where Pharaoh eats them, and for each body he consumes, he gains more strength, and eventually he may grow powerful enough to break free from the underworld. If he is able to do this, then he will be able to come to the surface and devour everyone and everything. This is why the people who followed this mythology believed so strongly in cremation, because he cannot gain strength from ashes. Pharaoh lives in what is called the House of Death, and it is a dark, creepy cave that preserves all things evil like black magic and the personifications of illness and disease. I don't know about you guys, but I hope Pharaoh stays in his little cave safe and sound in the underworld, because I don't want any part of that. In our number 9 spot today we have Zeus. Zeus is one of the most famous gods from Greek mythology and is well known as the god of thunder and the sky. First of all, Zeus had to defeat and overthrow his own father, but this isn't even close to the worst thing he did. It is well known that Zeus was all about what we'll call love and loving, as he fathered a ton of kids, but what is less talked about is how often he was the only one in the relationship who was a consenting person. I can't really give too much detail about this, but the story of him and Europa is pretty horrifying. Like, she was just a princess playing on a beach and Zeus saw her and fell in love with her, and instead of doing literally anything else, he just took what he wanted. To do this, he disguised himself as a bull, and when she pet him and climbed on his back, he took her off somewhere where he could be his little creepy self. This is just one example, and of course it was always written off as him seducing these women. Another famous instance was when he appeared to Princess Leda as a swan and seduced her, and then she went on to lay eggs, which was also very weird. But one of those eggs hatched to be Helen of Troy, which is cool, but that certainly does not justify his weird behavior. Either way, Zeus was weird and creepy. In our number 8 spot today we have Loviatar. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the little thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. Loviatar is from Finnish mythology and is regarded as the goddess of death and disease. She's the daughter of the god of death and the underworld queen, so she clearly was born for darkness. As legend would have it, Loviatar became impregnated by the wind and gave birth to 9 sons, which are the 9 diseases: consumption, colic, gout, rickets, ulcer, scab, cancer, and plague. That was only 8, but the 9th is a witch and is actually unnamed. It is said that he is unnamed because of the fact that he was considered the most dreadful. One super interesting thing about this goddess is that in original folklore she was actually not considered to be as dark. As the society became more patriarchal, she began to get darker and darker until she became the ruler of the underworld. In our number 7 spot today we have Aphrodite. Can we make a list of dark gods without including the jealous and vain goddess herself? Aphrodite comes from Greek mythology and she is the daughter of Zeus. Zeus was worried about her and was being a weird overprotective parent, so he forced her into marrying Hephaestus even though she did not want to. He was also Zeus's child but was broody and not so good looking, and he made weapons for the gods. Aphrodite was certainly not pleased, as I'm sure many of us would be if we were also forced into marriage, but she decided that she was just gonna be unfaithful. The real craziness comes when Hippolytus worshipped Artemis rather than Aphrodite, and like the vain goddess that she is, she decided to place a curse on his mother so that she would fall in love with her son. Of course Hippolytus was like, that's weird, and didn't want his own mother, so this caused his mother to take her own life. And she left a note claiming that her son had taken advantage of her, which is double crazy and horrifying. Because of this, Hippolytus' father sent him off to death by sea, so yeah, it was honestly pretty messed up that Aphrodite did that. In our number 6 spot today we have Lilith. Lilith is a demon goddess who appears a lot in mythology. Her dark origins start in Sumerian and Babylonian demonology, and she is the picture of the beautiful maiden with a dark spirit. Legend says once she chose a lover, she would never let him go and would give nothing in return. Some people believe that Lilith was actually the first wife of Adam and that the two were created equal, but Adam didn't like that she wasn't obedient to him, so he abandoned her, and this is when God made Eve. This is what is rumored to have turned Lilith into a snake, which then tempted Eve into the apple. After Adam and Eve were then banished from the Garden of Eden, Lilith turned into a demon goddess and vowed to get her revenge on all men. In our number 5 spot today we have Hanbi. Hanbi is a deity that comes from Sumerian and Akkadian mythology, and honestly just Mesopotamian mythology in general. He is a god that isn't as well known, as there's only a small amount of mythology surrounding him that has survived. Here's the dark thing about him though. He was literally the god of evil and of all evil forces. I feel like even with that small amount of information we have about him, that truthfully is enough to know he did some pretty dark things. Hanbi was considered the king of the underworld, and he fathered 2 sons. One named Pazuzu, who was also a demonic god and who was in control of the west and southwest winds, which would bring famine in the dry season and horrible storms in the rainy season. And another son named Humbaba, who was a demon god and protector of the cedar forest. All 3 of these demon gods weren't necessarily inherently bad, as demon in those times actually meant spirit rather than the evil connotation it has now, but it was certainly dependent on context, as they most definitely had the capacity for evil. In our number 4 spot today we have Apophis. Apophis was an evil god that comes to us from ancient Egyptian mythology, and he is said to be the god and demon of darkness, destruction, chaos, and evil. It was believed that he was the god who would cause catastrophic and unexplainable happenings like earthquakes and solar eclipses, and he had an entire army of demons at his disposal. In both part 1 of this video and most of the other gods on today's list, the gods who were dark were still worshipped because they weren't considered entirely bad, but Apophis is not like that. He was not worshipped and was only feared as he was considered all-powerful. He was depicted as a huge serpent, and it was thought that no matter how many times he was fought, he could never truly be defeated. He was known to eat the souls of both the living and the dead, so it was common practice for those being buried to have a spell buried with them so as to protect them from him. In our number 3 spot today we have Set. Set is a deity that comes to us from ancient Egyptian religion, and man, people really did not like him. Before people started to hate him, he was the god of foreigners, but after Egypt's conquest by different foreign nations, Set now became associated with oppressors. In the Osiris myth, which is the most important story in Egyptian mythology, Set is seen as an illegitimate leader, as he actually killed his own brother Osiris. He had to chop his body up into pieces as well to try and ensure that he never came back to life. It was after this that Osiris' wife Isis was able to reassemble her husband's corpse and bring him back to life with the help of another goddess. Unfortunately, she couldn't bring him back forever, but it was enough time to conceive their son, Horus. This is ancient mythology, so I won't dive into why that is weird to me. Horus of course made it his life mission to avenge his father, and there are many ancient myths about their battles. In our number 2 spot today we have Guayota. Guayota is a deity that comes from the Guanche mythology of Tenerife. He is actually the primary dark god in this mythology and plays a very integral role in the story. He is represented as a black dog and also always has other black dogs around him that were actually demons. According to the legend, he lived inside the Teta volcano as it was a gateway to the underworld. At some point, Guayota actually kidnapped Magic, who is the god of the sun, and shut them up in the volcano so as to throw the world into darkness. After humans prayed to their supreme god, he went and saved Magic and locked Guayota up instead inside of the volcano. Holy Jesus Christ. I think it's safe to say that a god who steals the sun and locks it away definitely needs to be hidden away inside of a volcano. In our number 1 spot today we have Lamashtu. Lamashtu is a goddess who comes from Mesopotamian mythology, and she certainly is terrible. Her name means she who erases, and this is because she would prey on women during childbirth and wait for them to be breastfeeding their new baby so she could kidnap the newborn and eat its flesh. I honestly don't know if it gets any darker than that. She was also known to disturb sleep and cause nightmares as one of her less worse qualities, but she would also be known to harm the environment, bound the muscle of men, and would bring sickness and disease. Mothers who were expecting children would wear an amulet that depicted her in order to protect their pregnancy from her. Sometimes people would even leave offerings to keep her appeased, which would always be small feminine objects. Remember when we talked about Pazuzu, who was the son of Hanbi? Well, despite his evil doings, he actually would also be summoned by women to protect them from evil. That evil course, Lamashtu, and Pazuzu was her one weakness. Pazuzu protected them either because he felt bad for the expectant mothers, or because he simply just really hated her, but either way, at least he was there to help instead of harm. There were some cultures where she was regarded as a guardian, but I'm sure they didn't hear the eating babies story, or else I feel like they would have changed their minds about that one. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Dionysus. Compared to some of the other gods we've talked about in other parts of this list, Dionysus is one of the more chill and relaxed gods in comparison. He is the god of quite a few things, as he is the god of the grape harvest, winemaking and wine, of fertility, orchards, fruit, vegetation, insanity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, festivity, and theater. Although he is regarded as a pretty low-key and less petty god, he is still a god that comes from Greek mythology, which certainly means that he's done at least a few dark things in his day. To start off with, let's talk about King Lycurgus of Thrace. Now this story changes a bit depending on which source you get it from, but basically to sum it all up, when this king refused to worship Dionysus and began to imprison those who did, he of course decided to punish the king. To get his revenge, he drove the king so mad and made him believe his own family were grapevines, which he ended up chopping up. So that's a little far. And if that wasn't enough, let's talk about one more story quickly, and that has to do with Pentheus, who is the king of Thebes. One of the first things he did upon becoming king was banning the worship of Dionysus, which we now know is something that this god really doesn't like. For this, Dionysus had his followers thrown into a frenzy where they tore the king apart limb by limb, and one of the people in this frenzy was the king's own mother. So again, we took this one just a little too far. In our number 9 spot today we have Khonsu. Khonsu is a god who comes to us from ancient Egypt as the god of the moon. His name means traveler, and it is believed that this was meant to symbolize the perceived traveling of the moon in the sky, which we now know it doesn't do. People are gonna be like, the moon doesn't travel, whatever. He most definitely wasn't all bad, as he was believed to watch over travelers in the night, and when he caused the crescent moon to shine, women conceived, cattle became fertile, and all nostrils and throats were filled with fresh air. He was mainly regarded as a healer, so it's hard to believe he has dark stories surrounding him, but like most gods, he could be helpful but also very dangerous. In part of the pyramid texts, this god is mentioned in the cannibal hymn. He is described as extremely bloodthirsty, and he was said to help the deceased king with catching and eating other gods. In the coffin texts, he is described as Khonsu who lives on hearts. Apparently he was considered much more dangerous and violent in earlier Egyptian history, but as time went on he began to soften up and became much more compassionate and kind. Honestly, despite the whole eating hearts and other gods thing, which was super weird, it's nice to see a god who really had some character growth over the years. I think that's something we can all appreciate. In our number 8 spot today we have Anubis. Anubis is the god of mummification and the afterlife, and is also the patron god of lost souls and the helpless. He is often confused with another Egyptian god, Wepwawet, because of the fact that they are both jackal gods, and it is believed that Anubis was derived from him. It is definitely safe to say that Anubis is not the darkest or scariest god on this list, but being the god of mummification, there's definitely some weird stuff going on here. He became the god of mummification because he was there for the first mummification when Isis had her brother/husband Osiris embalmed. The weird thing though is that Anubis likes to keep little trophies of the embalmed people, which gives off major serial killer energy. After Osiris was slain by Set, which we talked about in part 2, Set offered Osiris's organs to Anubis. This kicked off his super strange collection of mummified body parts. Imagine explaining that to your guests while hosting a dinner party. In our number 7 spot today we have Pararug. I might have said that horribly wrong. Pararug is one god on this list that doesn't have a lot of information on what he looked like, which leads many to believe he may have taken a spirit form rather than a human or animal form. He comes to us from Slavic mythology and is said to be a dark and mysterious deity, and is usually described as evil, which is never a good sign. He is the god of quarreling, fighting, hate, jealousy, and really all the most ugly human emotions. He is said to bring negativity to people and make them hate each other. Basically any sort of discord between between two people is thought to be the work of him. Unfortunately, not a lot of myths surrounding him have survived over time, so we don't really have any particular stories involving him, but I believe the thought that he just brings discord and fighting and negativity in general is a perfect reason to be on today's list. Next time you're in a fight with someone you love, just remember that maybe it's not really you in the situation, but instead the work of Pararug. In our number 6 spot today we have Sekhmet. Sekhmet is one of the oldest known Egyptian deities, and she could either be known as the Lady of Terror or the Lady of Life, depending on which side of hers you were on. Her name means power, and she has the ability to control diseases. She had the ability to protect those she cared for from diseases, but also held the power to spread pestilence and disease or plagues to those she didn't. She had the title of patron of physicians and healers, and her priests became widely regarded as skilled doctors. So, while she certainly wasn't all bad and definitely helped many people stay healthy and happy, she also could and did punish people with some of the most horrible illnesses, and that is something I'd never wish on anyone. Probably for the best to just stay on her good side. In our number 5 spot today we have Hades. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the little thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. I can't believe we've made it to part 3 of this video without talking about Hades, but here we finally are. Hades is the king of the underworld and the god of the dead, and I'm not sure if it gets any darker than that. It was believed that just by speaking his name he would have the power to bring you to the underworld, so people tried to avoid his name like it was Voldemort. Hades was sure to never let any souls that entered the underworld escape, and he would punish anyone who tried, or anyone who tried to save someone in the underworld. One of his darkest myths is in reference to the time he kidnapped Persephone. He opened up the earth where she was picking flowers and kept her in the underworld. Persephone's mother, Demeter, was of course really unhappy about this and did everything she could to get her back. Hades finally agrees to let her go, but of course there's always a twist with these guys. He gives her a pomegranate seed as a parting gift, which she eats. Little does she know, if you eat food from the underworld, it binds you to it, so now she is bound to Hades, and basically the story ends off with her being allowed to live a few months of the year on Earth, but the rest of the time she is stuck in the underworld. So yeah, Hades is just out there kidnapping people, which is super uncool. In our number 4 spot today we have Tartarus. We have most definitely spoken about Tartarus on this channel before, but not quite in the same way we are going to today. Usually when talking about mythology, Tartarus is known as the place where people are banished to. It is a deep abyss that is used as a sort of dungeon of torment and suffering for people who did bad things. But what if I told you that Tartarus is actually a deity? He is one of the primordial deities, which are the gods that all others stem from. The place of Tartarus is said to be the actual body of the deity instead of him taking on a human form. He is ranked as the 3rd in power after Chaos, who is the first deity, and Gaia, who is the earth. So not only is he housing and torturing people, albeit the fact that most of the people there probably deserved it, but he is also said to be the father of some of the darkest and scariest monsters there has ever been. In our number 3 spot today we have Veles. Veles is a major Slavic god, and he is said to be the god of earth, water, livestock, and the underworld, which seems like quite a combination of things. One of the best known things about him that he is the arch nemesis of Perun, who is the god of the sky, thunder, lightning, and storms. One of the darkest things that he is known for is in relation to Perun and why they hate each other. The story changes a bit depending on the source, but it's all relatively similar, with Veles stealing either Perun's cattle, wife, or children, which to be fair, some of these are worse than others, but they're all bad enough to be upset at someone for. In the storm myth or the divine battle, Veles has the ability to shapeshift, so he likes to take the form of a snake and try to slither up the sacred tree to Perun's domain, but Perun strikes back with lightning bolts. Veles tries to get away by shapeshifting into trees and animals, but in the end Perun prevails and kills him. In this ritual death, whatever he stole from Perun is released from his body in the form of raindrops falling from the sky, and this is the myth that ancient Slavs used in relation to the changing seasons. So in the end, Veles is a kidnapper, I guess, and Perun shouldn't be messed with. In the number 2 spot today we have Poseidon. Poseidon is the god of the sea, but he is equally as well known for his bad temper and violence, which is not a good combination for a deity. He was believed to also be the creator of earthquakes and horses, which seems a little random. He is usually depicted on a 4-horse chariot holding his most recognizable emblem, the trident. He is the son of Cronus and Rhea, and like all their children except for Zeus, Poseidon was swallowed by his father before Zeus saved all of his siblings and their father was subsequently defeated. Poseidon has a history of fighting both with other gods as well as mortal men, so it's no surprise he made it onto this list today. While we could discuss a few dark things he's done, today we'll just talk about one, and that is what he did to Medusa. We all have heard of Medusa before, the woman with snakes for hair that turns anyone who looks at her to stone, but did you know that she wasn't always like this? Medusa used to be a beautiful woman who was a priestess to the goddess Athena. For whatever reasons, one of the rules around being a priestess was being a virgin, and that may seem unimportant, because it should be, but unfortunately that is an integral part of this myth. Poseidon really liked Medusa and tried to pursue her, but Medusa wasn't interested and tried to escape him by running to the temple of Athena. Unfortunately, Poseidon found her at the temple and decided to take advantage of her right then and there. After Athena found out about this, instead of punishing Poseidon for being a major slimeball, she turned her rage to Medusa, who was simply just a victim. To punish Medusa, she turned her hair to snakes and made her face so terrible that if anyone looked at it, they would be turned to stone. I guess this story shows how awful both Poseidon and Athena could be. I grew up thinking that Medusa was the monster, but as it turns out, not everything is as it seems. In our number 1 spot today we have Bearstuk. Bearstuk is a Wendish evil god of the forest and is known for his trickery. He is often described as being half man and half goat, but there are some sources which claim he's actually all shadow and doesn't have a human form at all, and instead is more of a spirit of the woods. So here's what dark thing he's got going on. He likes to trick wanderers of the forest into getting lost. Yup, literally a full-on nightmare. He likes to hang out in the dark depths of the forest waiting for the moment to strike. Once a wanderer stumbles across his path, he'll play tricks where he changes the path in the woods, or he'll whisper in their ears to frighten them and lay branches in their way so that they'll trip and fall. And he does all this simply because he just enjoys the suffering of others. Many of the other gods on this list also do some good things, but I couldn't find any happy or nice stories about this one.